So Roger Waters' full re-recording of The Dark Side of the Moon, which came out this past Friday, begins rather confusingly with a song that isn't on The Dark Side of the Moon. To be precise, a recitation of the lyrics of the song Free 4, which is on the 1972 soundtrack album Obscured by Clouds. Now, I suspect almost everybody that you or I might meet over the age of 40 could sing along with pretty much every word of Dark Side, whereas I'm making a mental list of people that I'm personally acquainted with who've probably even heard the song Free 4, and it's really quite small. But Free 4 isn't just any obscure Pink Floyd song. It's one of the first pieces that helped define the tone and the mood and concerns of the classic work in the run that would begin a year later with Dark Side. And it might, off the top of my head, I think, be the first Pink Floyd song to refer to the fact that Roger Waters' father died in World War II, which of course would become a central aspect of both The Wall and the final cut. And the song begins with the line, "The memories of a man in his old age are the deeds of a man in his prime." In the original version, these words are delivered with a deceptively jaunty style that belies their sadness.
Memories of a man in his old age are the deeds of a man in his prime.
And in the redux, they are whispered mournfully.
The memories of a man in his old age are the deeds of a man in his prime.
In the voice of a man in his old age, in the act of remembering the deeds he did in his prime. So he's taking the same words about aging and mortality that he was once able to bring across cheerfully. He's restating them with a hard-won understanding of what they really mean. Now, that's a very smart thing to do, actually. I was impressed when I heard that. I like that. But more than that, I think it's emblematic both in tone, style, and also content of what sets this re-recording apart from the original, where Waters' interests and moods were at the time he was creating it. So that opening interpolation, in its spoken form rather than sung, signals the key difference in how these re-recordings are presented, which is that the instrumental tracks now contain various spoken word monologues. On the Run includes a narration of a dream, Great Gig in the Sky includes a story about the estate of a dying friend. The solos in Money have been replaced by a long narrative about a man being seduced by the devil. And these monologues are often quite well written. They're moving. They feel like a very earnest expression of where Waters' mind and heart are in 2023. Now, individual people may have more or less tolerance for actually listening to long-spoken monologues. I'll talk later about how they affect the album's actual listenability, but they are a way of adapting this music into an expression of his present self. So aside from all the monologuing, how does it work as music? Well, it's tonally of a piece with the gloom of the spoken word bits. You know, going into this album, I read some suggestions that the songs would be rearranged somehow or stylistically transformed, or there would be experiments with things like a, country western vibe. I don't hear anything that registers anything like that at all, actually. Maybe there's subtleties I'm not picking up on in how these have been moved into new styles or new genres, but, every song is based around acoustic guitar, around strings, around a quiet, undistorted organ, around slow, minimal drums. Dynamically, it's all delivered at a hush, and it remains quiet, even in places where it might once have had a swelling crescendo.
Forward he cried from the rear, and the front rang dire.
And Waters' voice sounds drastically older and hoarser, raspier than he did even 6 years ago on Is This the Life We Really Want? That effect is particularly noticeable on Money, where he delivers the whole song in sort of a razor-sharp, unmelodic whisper. And, the whole thing kind of creates a vibe of stubbornly insisting that you will not have fun with this song that is maybe, the most excessively fun thing in the catalog.
Money, get away.
So the color, the dynamics, the melody, the beauty of the original, those have all been, for the most part, honestly, stripped away replaced with a very concentrated version of the bitter melancholy that's often been at the heart of his work. Do I like it? Well, I don't think I'll be listening to it that often, but that's perhaps not the same thing as saying that it's not good. The spoken word bits I do think are, very well written, they're well delivered. Ultimately, the spoken word isn't really a style that holds up well to repeated immersion the way that something more melodic might have. The underlying material remains lovely. The new arrangements do have enjoyable qualities, but ultimately these are familiar songs. They're as familiar as any song could be. So, the combination of the spoken word style plus the familiarity of the material, I think, inevitably means that I may not be in the mood to come back to this stuff all that often, and I don't know that many other people will either. But it is, I think, moving on its own terms. It is a distinct statement on its own terms. Maybe in a perfect world, it would have been more interesting to have new songs to say some of the same things. But, as the thing that we have, I do find it has a certain kind of integrity in its attempt to bring a message and an idea across. And it takes a particular kind of mood to want to listen to any solo Roger Waters, all of which tends to be intelligent, but stiflingly sad, musically monotonous, 28% too long. And I say that even as someone who really likes some of his solo stuff quite a lot, despite those qualities. I'd even say that I love the last 4 songs on Amused to Death almost as deeply as any music. And if you happen to be spending some time in the mood for something that is monotonous, overlong, stiflingly sad, but fundamentally smart, heartfelt, literate, I think this will make a good addition to, a solo Waters binge, along with Amused to Death, Is This the Life We Really Want? Maybe Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. All that being said, Gilmour and Waters have hated each other and been incapable of working together for basically my whole life. And that's something that I've always accepted just as a fact about the world. It's been true for as long as I've been aware enough to be aware of it. And it's not something I've ever lost much sleep over. And in general, most of the great creative collaborations that fueled bands that I love personally have long ago run their course for every type of personal or artistic or economic reason. I don't listen to the last couple Mike and the Mechanics albums and Tony Banks's solo classical albums, Phil Collins's Motown covers, and say, here's 3 people that should continue to make music together. It does seem like their interests have diverged enough that maybe there's not a lot of room left for collaboration. And I think if you somehow reunited Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe, got them all in a room, made them write an album together, I wouldn't be all that excited to hear the result. But there's something about the blend of Gilmour and Waters that's almost an archetypal case of 2 people evening out each other's weaknesses. Waters is a brilliant writer of words. He's a great conceptualist. He's a very distinctive singer. He's not much of a melodicist, and in his solo work, he hasn't really shown any kind of talent for stylistic innovation in a musical sense. Gilmour is a brilliant melodicist. He's a brilliant texturist. He's one of the most distinctive instrumental voices in the world. He's a conventionally beautiful singer, but his lyrics are pretty pedestrian, and, none of his solo albums really have the urgency, the driving need to say something that Waters, for better or worse, never lost. I listen to this and I can almost imagine an album where Waters writes about aging with the passion and intelligence and emotional depth of these spoken word pieces, but matched to something with the melodic character, sonic color of Gilmour's best work. It really does seem to me like they're still both capable of making work that expresses their best artistic qualities, and that those qualities would still blend exceptionally well. And it's really too bad that that will absolutely never happen. I remember when the remix of Animals came out a few months ago, I read some of the pointlessly mean-spirited, shit-talky things that Waters said about the band's history, and I thought, if you think about the song Dogs, for instance, right, there's a way that captures certain qualities of callous selfishness, of pointless competitive drive, of cutting yourself off from the people who should be the most dear to you. a way that it captures and critiques those qualities. And perhaps Waters could do that so well because those were, to some extent, in his own heart, something he was trying to face and escape in himself, which would mean the qualities that allowed him to succeed as an artist are the same as the qualities which inevitably tore him apart from the collaborators that made such great work with him. But this new redux of Dark Side of the Moon makes me reflect that that really is too bad, in a way that maybe I hadn't thought about before. Check out Electric Brain, Electric Shadow on Bandcamp or your favorite streaming service. You can also find album playlists right here on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want me to keep doing this, and I'll see you all next week.